Why do Americans say never let the American flag touch the ground? The answer begins long before that American flag ever existed. Let's go back 250 years ago when cannonballs were tearing through earthen walls, smoke filled the air, and soldiers braced for certain death. Amid that chaos, a man named William Jasper leaped into legend because he saved a flag. That simple act of courage in 1776 marked a tradition of honor that still defines America today. I'm J.D. Bias, historian and award-winning photojournalist, and this is Lens on History, where we help you find hidden history, interpret it, and photograph it. This season we're in Savannah, Georgia in the Lowcountry. I'll be adding a few photo clips from things I shoot around Monterey Square today. That is, if they don't suck sour pickles. In that case, you'll never see them, and we'll just keep going. And this is the very sweet pickle, our researcher and producer, Becky.
Hi, everyone.
So, who was William Jasper? And why don't we let the American flag touch the ground today? Most people say it's respect, which it is, but Jasper's story ties that tradition to, that's a tradition of life or death in battle, victory or defeat. And it was crucial on the battlefield. Okay, as for the flag of the United States of America, it's considered a sign of respect that was adopted after the American Civil War and actually became law in some states. Then in 1942, Congress passed the U.S. Flag Code, telling how it should be handled, and some folks still stand by that code. However, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down those laws in 1989, ruling that they were unconstitutional and that the code should only be used as a guideline. So how did those guidelines come about? If you remember the movie The Patriot, when Mel Gibson's character grabs the flag off the ground, it's fallen in battle, runs toward the enemy, and all the American forces see him, turn around, and follow him to victory. That practice of keeping the flag flying in battle goes back to ancient times. In the days before World War I, identification flags, colors as they were called, or they are called, were carried by different units so their leaders could see where each unit was as the battle took place. They don't do that anymore, of course. If a flag was not flying, or the king or the general or whoever was in charge couldn't see it, they would assume that the unit was taken out of action. That act of keeping the flag from falling to the ground is where we get the tradition of preventing the stars and stripes from touching the ground today. That and showing respect for not getting it dirty. That's very simplistic, but it's how I understand it and explain it. If you have a different interpretation or just want to make a point, put it in the comments down below. And in the meantime, we'll go back to Jasper. The monument to William Jasper is in Savannah's Madison Square. But Madison Square, it's more than the monument. It's was a crossroads of the Revolutionary War battles, Civil War legends, and even Hollywood moments. Now, I will tell you that I grew up in North California. I had never heard of Sergeant William Jasper before I came to Savannah. That chapter in history wasn't taught in our schools.
I was born in Georgia and grew up in Maryland, and we didn't study Jasper either.
Hey, Beck, glad you're here. I think I figured out why we didn't hear about William Jasper or other heroes from the South.
Why is that?
After the Civil War, Southern history was pushed aside. The great battles and the heroes associated with the South just disappeared. The whole idea of a Northern history is logical because the North won the Civil War.
I wouldn't say that too loudly down here in Georgia. So, how are we approaching this?
We'll start with Sergeant William Jasper's actions at Fort Moultrie, South Carolina in 1776. That's what made him so legendary. During a British bombardment of the fort, the flagstaff was shot away, knocked down by a cannonball. The colors fell into the dirt. Jasper didn't hesitate. He climbed the rampart. With cannonballs whizzing by, he grabbed the fallen flag and fastened it to a cannon ramrod and put it back up so the general could see what was going on. That wasn't just bravery, it was defiance. It became a symbol of hope and served as the American rebels' measure of success or failure as the flag flew over the battlefield. That's how Jasper's story began. A legend grew around it, but the event actually happened. See, stories like this remind us that symbols matter. One man's courage can inspire hundreds. Jasper wasn't done after Fort Moultrie. One of his daring feats took place near Savannah. See, British soldiers were marching American prisoners from South Carolina to Savannah, and they were confident that since they were within the sight of the city, they'd stop and get a drink out of the spring and rest. So they stacked their rifles up, and as you see on the movies, and they had 2 guards hold the prisoners. Well, Jasper and a sergeant named Newton had been following them. When the British knelt down at the spring to get a drink, the 2 men jumped out from the woods, shot the guards, seized their muskets, and captured the British and freed the prisoners. Then they marched the British back to South Carolina, where they came from. Family records and local lore say that Sergeant William Jasper had a brother who fought for the crown, a loyalist, and he was stationed near Ebenezer, Georgia. Jasper is said to have visited his brother at the camp and learned of the prisoner movements and used that knowledge to rescue the men at the spring. William Jasper couldn't read or write. Matter of fact, he signed his name with an X. And although he was offered, he rejected an officer's commission. He was rooted in the common man. He didn't want to be an officer. And we'll see later that common man heroism comes to life in another story. Okay, Beck, you found some interesting information?
Yes, and here's a cool fact. Jasper is likely the only non-commissioned officer from the Revolution with 3 major monuments honoring him. The one in Madison Square, the Fort Moultrie Monument in Charleston, and at Jasper Spring, which is about 2 miles west of Savannah's historic district.
It's powerful to think the man who refused a commission, who jumped into enemy fire, may have had his own brother fighting against him. It reminds us that the revolution in the South was personal. It was intimate and it was brutal. On October 9th, 1779, well, that was a day that sealed Jasper's legend. The combined American and French forces attempted to retake Savannah from the British. The assault centered on the Spring Hill Redoubt on the west side of town. There was terrible hand-to-hand fighting, brutal canister fire, shotgun-like artillery, thick smoke and chaos. It was foggy. They couldn't see very well. Some reports say that Jasper carried the flag to the ramparts of the Spring Hill Redoubt, and that was considered to be a great honor. But he was shot and killed. Another account that I read said he didn't quite make it. He was actually killed when he crossed the abatis. Now, abatis is felled trees. They have their branches sharpened. They point it toward the enemy. It's a bit like charging into a large porcupine. One report said he was seen hanging there when the Patriots retreated. He was already gone. Now, the 15.5-foot tall bronze statue depicting his heroics, that was unveiled in 1888. But the story of the flag that wouldn't fall still resonates today. See, when you see a flag flying, remember the man who refused to let one touch the ground. And Jasper may have not been a household name everywhere, but here in the South, he's a symbol of the soldier sergeant who stood at the center of the Revolution's warfare and grabbed a place in their memory. So here's what we should take away from the story. One is that heroism isn't just great generals. It's the privates, corporals, and sergeants who carry the flag and enter the breach and do the heavy fighting. And two, the revolution in the South was messy. It was guerrilla tactics. Loyalties were divided. Around Savannah, the swamps and the marshes took a toll. And three, history symbolically lives in places. Madison Square isn't just a park. It's a battlefield. It's a battlefield in memory and in fact. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. But first, let me remind you to check out our affiliate links down below. If you purchase something on the list, it helps support the show, which means we may get a commission, but it'll be at no cost to you. It's all the same price. But you will help create more shows like this one. Okay, Beck, what did the notes say about Madison Square?
Named for President James Madison, the fourth U.S. president, the square was laid out in 1837.
In 1779, during the Siege of Savannah, British troops, including units of African descent, held positions here against the Americans and French and Irish and Haitian soldiers out to all around the city. So when you walk in this square today, you're standing on ground where military forces clashed for control of the city and the country. And the majority of the British soldiers were formerly enslaved African Americans. Okay, let's follow the rabbit a little farther. Let's talk about what's around Jasper's monument. On the southwest corner is St. John's Church. It's finished in 1853 in a Gothic revival style. Now, some interesting stories came out of the Civil War around this church and the house next door. Legend says, and there are several versions of the legend, but it says after Union General William Tecumseh Sherman captured Savannah during the Civil War, he was in his office in the Green Meldrum house next door. And the ladies in town wanted to annoy the great general, so they would take turns constantly ringing the church bells. Well, Sherman finally had enough, so he had his soldiers take the bells down. Later on, officials in Washington, D.C. heard what had happened, and they sent him orders to put the bells back up. And he was a good soldier. He followed orders, so he put the bells back up. But he hung them upside down so they couldn't ring. Now, this is one of those quirky Savannah tales that you don't know if are fact or fiction, but they blend seamlessly into the history of Savannah, and a lot of people believe it's true. So, was it true? Who knows? Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Okay, more rabbits. Let's get back to the tour of the square. Next to the church was Sherman's headquarters, which I mentioned, and it was the home of Charles Greene. He was a British merchant. He had it built in the 1850s. Now, when Sherman's army entered Savannah on December 21st, 1864, Greene offered his home as headquarters for the army. Now, this is where General Sherman stayed after his historic march to the sea, and where he dictated his very famous telegram saying he gave the city of Savannah to Abraham Lincoln as a Christmas present. It's an interesting house, architecturally, in that it features a Victorian ventilation system that uses burning gas jets, and it's in the cupola, and it draws the air out as the gas burns. It pulls the air through and brings cooler air in. Now, later on, a judge named Peter Meldrum bought it, and today it's open for tours. You can go in most days of the week, and you can look around and see a place in American history that changed American history. Now, across the street is the Sorrel Wheat House. It was built around 1840, and it's a mixture of Regency and Greek Revival style. The family's son, Gilbert Moxley Sorrel, or Sorrel if you're in the South, well, Sorrel became a Confederate general, and he was one of the youngest generals in the Confederate Army, one of the youngest brigadiers.
Okay, according to what we have in our notes here, he was also an aide to General Longstreet. But the house is also famous for ghosts. Visitors report hearing voices, seeing apparitions, and encountering strange shadows. So whether you believe it or not, it's a stunning example of antebellum architecture and Savannah's layered history.
The thing I know is that a house or business in Savannah, well, if it doesn't have a ghost, it'll import one from Charleston for the weekend, just for the tourist trade. Now, across the square, on the corner of Bull and Charlton Street, is the Scottish Rite Temple. That was built in 1912. Its first floor once housed Solomon's Pharmacy. And now the bottles, if you're a bottle collector, you prize the antique medicine bottles that came from that location. Today it's the Griffin Tea Room, which is part of Savannah College of Art and Design. And yes, you've seen it before if you saw Forrest Gump. Remember the feather floats around by the first steeple and by a building? That's the building. So one of the first scenes in Forrest Gump starts right here at Madison Square. Over across the street is the old Savannah Volunteer Guard Armory. It's now classrooms for SCAD. It was built in 1892 and is a fortress-like Romanesque style. Now, two 24-pounder cannons stand on each side of the entrance. Now, they're capped with cannonballs. And in the arches around the building, which where the storefront windows are now, that used to be barn doors where the horse-drawn caissons pull the cannons in and out.
It notes here that when SCAD was founded in late 1978, this was the first classroom building that opened in 1979. But the cannons by the front door aren't the only cannons in the square.
Yes, you're right. Across the street on the edge of the square are two Civil War cannons that mark the start of the old Ogeechee Road. It's where we used to start. It used to, well, it still does, lead down southwest to Darien and Brunswick and on, you go on down to Florida, because now it's Highway 17. Now, even these cannons tell stories. They mark the approximate location where the British fortifications stood during the Siege of Savannah. Remember, 1779. And that's when Jasper died. Right where the western cannon stands, the ramparts for the British once turned, well, it came along where the Green Meldrum House is now and turned right at the cannon and went down about 2 blocks to the east, back in 1779, of course. The British troops holding this ground weren't just any soldiers. They were African-American men fighting for the British crown. A guy named Lord Dunsmore in 1775 made a proclamation and promised to free any enslaved person who joined up to fight for the British, and thousands seized the chance. And some did it right here on this very land that is now Madison Square.
And about half a mile to the northwest, where Jasper's statue is facing, another unit of black troops, Haitians, were fighting and supporting the French and American soldiers near what is now called Battlefield Park.
Yes, and that brings us full circle back to Sergeant William Jasper. From saving the flag over at Fort Moultrie, to freeing prisoners near Savannah, to the monument that keeps his memory alive, his courage was carved into this city and into counties and towns around America, all across the eastern half. Now, Madison Square may look peaceful today, but every corner tells a story of revolution, Union occupation, resilience, reinvention. And another thing to remember is to check out our affiliate links, as I said, down below.
And please hit that like and subscribe button. As Gus is telling you, that helps others to find the channel.
So, if you didn't already know this story, now you know. I'll see you next time.
Bye.